We're also learning more about the rates at which the Trump administration is detaining undocumented parents of children who are U.S. citizens. ProPublica found that in the first 7 months of President Trump's second term, the administration detained the parents of more than 11,000 U.S. citizens. That's an average of more than 50 kids a day having a parent pulled into detention. ProPublica used data from the University of Washington Center for Human Rights as part of a public records lawsuit. And the piece highlights one family, parents Doris Flores and Edulio Velasquez, who were taken from their daughters, an 8-year-old and a 4-month-old who was still breastfeeding. And Doris left them in the hands of her pastor and his wife. Current and former officials from DHS told ProPublica that these types of separations are not a violation of policy, noting guidelines on officer discretion have changed. DHS also told ProPublica that it does not separate families. And one of the reporters from that piece joins us now, ProPublica investigative reporter Micah Rosenberg. We're also joined by immigration attorney Veronica Cardenas. Micah, let's start with your reporting. I want to get into the details. Your analysis also finds that mothers appear to be disproportionately detained. What did you learn exactly, and how does this data compare to past administrations?
Yeah, so my colleagues and I received this exclusive data that for the first time allowed us to really quantify the scope and scale of how U.S. citizen children are being impacted by Trump's mass deportation campaign. And as you mentioned, we found that there were 11,000 U.S. citizen kids who had an immigrant parent detained in Trump's second term. But that's definitely an undercount because the data we have only goes through mid-August of last year. And you can really see some stark differences with the Biden administration. My colleague Jeff Ernthausen on the data team, who was really crunching the numbers, he found that Trump deported mothers at 4 times the rate as mothers were deported under Biden. And at the same time, Trump is arresting and detaining many more immigrants and immigrant parents with only minor criminal records in the U.S. or no criminal history at all. So what often happens in these cases is family separations because U.S. citizens are not allowed to go into ICE detention with their parents. And so if they're detained, there's an inevitable period of separation from their children. Unlike the family detention center that you mentioned earlier, only immigrant children can go into detention with their parents, not U.S. citizens.
Yeah, and I just want to underscore, we're talking about parents who may be undocumented but have U.S. citizen children, and these parents are taken from those children. You say, when we hear officials say they're targeting criminals, that's just not apparently the case for so many of the cases you've uncovered here. What kinds of personal stories did you hear?
Well, you mentioned the story that we found in Florida. My colleague Mario Ariza spoke with mother Doris Flores, who had a 4-month-old U.S. citizen and an 8-year-old who was born in Honduras. But they, like many immigrants in Florida, had a routine interaction with law enforcement that didn't find anything. It was actually because of a threat that another kid made against the older daughter. Police didn't find anything related to the threat, but because they were working with immigration officials, they found out that both of the parents were from Honduras. They had outstanding deportation orders. The father had an old DUI, and the mother had missed an asylum hearing that she was appealing. But they, regardless of that, ended up detaining both of the parents at the same time. And, that left them scrambling what to do with this 4-month-old who was still breastfeeding. And they ended up calling their pastor, who had to come over in the middle of the night with his wife, who's also a pastor. And they ended up taking in these children in the last minute as the parents were detained.
That's just a slice of how all of this is unfolding. Veronica, what's your reaction to this reporting?
I would like to just start with the quote that you could tell a lot about a country by how they treat their most vulnerable. And every administration has struggled how to deal with parents of U.S. citizen children. Prior administrations haven't gotten it right, but what we've seen with this administration in particular is that as a matter of policy, they're breaking what historically has been done. So U.S. citizen children have to be exceptional. First-generation citizens have to be exceptional because baked into immigration law is this requirement of exceptionalism for U.S. citizen children to save their parents. So they already account for some type of family separation and hardship stemming from that family separation. What we're seeing this administration doing, though, and what he has tried to do since January of 2025 is reduce citizenship for children born in the United States, born to undocumented parents, to nothing. So we see this citizenship not protecting them. Once a person is detained, once their parents are detained, if the child can't prove that they will suffer hardship beyond what family separation is expected to, their parents will be deported. And most likely, if we're talking about a 6-month-old, a 13-year-old, they may have to be removed with their parents also.
Wow, and we, of course, have that birthright citizenship case before the Supreme Court being argued just next week.
Right.
Micah's piece also points out that the Trump administration officials had revised a document advising how ICE officers should interact with these families, and specifically the parents, removing the word humane. Your thoughts on the significance of that, and how does that line up with some of the newer cases you're taking on?
It actually describes all of the cases that I'm taking on. There was one incident in New Jersey in particular where they detained both parents. They took them and they left the children in the car. Like they're not thinking about procedurally what are we supposed to be doing with United States citizen children when we're taking away their parents. And so most of the actions under this administration removes the word humane from all of immigration, which is something that prior administrations have tried to put in some place.
Well, it is all important for us to be discussing. Thank you for providing your insights. And Micah Rosenberg, thank you for your excellent reporting. I encourage our viewers to read your piece on ProPublica's website. It's very eye-opening. Appreciate you both, Veronica Cardenas and Micah Rosenberg.